feeling the blessing of this place, this moment, this awesome God. Looking down and seeing Bishop Pearson and Gina, seeing you sit here. See, I have a picture I want to show you. Let's see. That's my daughter last Wednesday on the first day of kindergarten. I posted that on Facebook and somebody commented, Martin Luther King's dream is alive. And I remember when my wife and I, having lost a young daughter, decided we wanted to adopt a young daughter, and it's quite a process if you've ever adopted a child. And one of the questions that they ask you is, what race children are you open to? And they give you a whole list. Race, I didn't even know, some races I didn't even know existed. And so that's quite a thoughtful question when you're confronted with that. And I remember my wife and I having a long conversation about what kind of child, does it matter? Why does it matter? Is it important? Is it not important? Can we raise a child that comes from a different background? And I remember that just before this happened, you all, I'm looking at Bishop Pearson and Gina and the New Dimensions Chorale and Pastor David, and you all came to All Souls. And that Sunday, the first Sunday when you all were here and we worshiped together, and I walked out of the church and my wife said, I think we can adopt an African-American child because now she will have a family here in Tulsa, a real family, a church family, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters. And so if you don't know my family, this is my daughter Lila, this beautiful little African-American girl in the photo. And I decided to show this to you this morning because my subject is the 3 agreements. And there are 3 core agreements that hold this congregation together. And it's interesting to look at those agreements in light of the events that have been happening here over the last few weeks, especially 6-hour drive up the road in Ferguson, Missouri. Let me show you a picture of, let's go back. That's 6-hour drive up the road in Ferguson. That's not a rock. I know it looks like a rock. That's 6 hours away in Ferguson, Missouri, just a few days ago. Where a third unarmed African-American male youth was killed by police in a 3-week period this summer, which sparked riots there and protests all over the country. Now, I've been asked many times, why is it that I care so much about race? And why is it that when something happens in our nation, whether it's Katrina in New Orleans or Trayvon Martin being shot or Mike Brown and the situation in Ferguson, why is it that I always bring up these issues? Why do I care so much about race? Is it because I have an African-American child? That's part of it. Is it because I'm a minister in a city that's reputation includes being the home to the largest and deadliest race riot in the United States history back in 1921? And that's part of it. Is it because this congregation was founded 2 months before the race riot, and a few of its founders were likely involved in shaping the context for the riot? That's part of it too. But to be really personal and really honest about it this morning, it's because I'm Jewish. I'm part Jewish. My whole father's side of the family are all Jews. And although I'm not a practicing Jew, obviously, it's an important part of my ethnic heritage and my history. And my father, when he was a child, In his lifetime, 6 million Jews were murdered, including children, not for anything that they had done, but just for who they are. They were deemed less than and demeaned and despised and publicly taunted and tortured. But when you step back and we look at the situation, the issue was not really about the Jews. It's about what kind of world we want to live in. When we speak of the 3 agreements, we're talking about what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world in which children and their parents and their grandparents are hated or scapegoated, or just because they're deemed less than someone else? I want to share with you 3 questions that every Jew knows. They come from Rabbi Hillel, who lived just over 2,000 years ago. He was the generation before Jesus was born. And Rabbi Hillel, he's actually well known because he was the one who was asked one time, can you recite all of the commandments in the Torah while standing on one leg? And he said, yes. He said, love God and don't do to anyone else what you wouldn't want done to you. All the rest is commentary. Which obviously Jesus liked, because that's probably one of the most well-known sayings of his. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Rabbi Hillel asked, if I'm not for myself, who will be? It's a question of, do I know what I'm about? Do I know who I am? Do I know what I want? His second question is, if I'm only for myself, what am I? It's about knowing that we are inextricably tied to others. And lastly, if not now, then when? And let's keep in mind that we're not talking in generalities this morning. We're talking right here and right now. And right now in the United States, there are African American young men being killed in the streets by people who are supposed to protect them and protect all of us. In a 3-week period, 3 unarmed African American young men were killed by police in New York. Eric Garner was strangled to death on July 17th. He was selling individual cigarettes. Illegal? Yes. A capital crime? I don't think so. In Ohio, on August 4th, John Crawford was shot in a Walmart while holding a BB gun that he was looking at that was being sold at that store. And then 4 days later in Ferguson, Missouri, unarmed Michael Brown was shot 6 times and killed. Witnesses say that he was backing up with his hands in the air saying, don't shoot, when most of those 6 bullets riddled his body and took his life. He had just graduated from high school. In 2 weeks, he was going to start technical school, technical college. And although this is also in a different category, it still adds to the moment that during those same 3 weeks, this summer, well, those 3 unarmed black males were killed by an on-duty police officer. Jeremy Lake, 19-year-old Tulsan, unarmed, was murdered by an off-duty police officer right here in Tulsa, a few miles from this church. And yet, as I said about the Jews in Europe, the situation today is really not about African American males. They are the canaries in the coal mine. This is about all of us and what kind of world we want to live in. This is about making sure that the police cannot kill with impunity. It's about making sure that the government is accountable to the people. It's about the dangers to all of us and to our society when we start militarizing the police. It is about what happens when anyone is deemed less than others. Not everyone agrees that race is a relevant issue, is the relevant issue regarding this rash of police killings of citizens. But I've been racking my brain all week to try to think of one accidental killing of a white male by police officers this summer. And then I was trying to think of the name of one in the last year. And then I thought, let me try to think of one in the last 10 years, and I can't think of any. Can you? But there is a small sign of progress that I think it's really important that we celebrate, and that is that polls are showing that the numbers of white identified Americans right now who say that race still is an issue in our culture and who think that race is a factor in this recent spree of police killings has grown significantly from just over 2 years ago when Trayvon Martin was killed. So what that tells us, and E.J. Dionne wrote about this recently in the Washington Post, is that even though there is still a large gap in the way that white and black people in this country perceive these issues, the gap is closing. At least it's going the right direction. And that's a sign of hope. Because it becomes so apparent when these issues come up, whether it's the O.J. Simpson verdict some years ago, Hurricane Katrina, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, this incredible gap between the perception of what's happening in our nation and what's important between people who are white and those who are African American. I read this morning, an article that said 75% of white identified Americans have zero social contact with any African Americans. None. 75%. And on the other side, so it's much better, but still pretty shocking, 65% of African Americans have no contact, social contact. Maybe at work, maybe here or there, but not any social contact with white folks. So just imagine how it's clear how the perceptions can be so different, and that's why bringing the poets and bringing the voices of all kinds of different people from different racial backgrounds, ethnic heritages, all of that into this church, into our lives to make sure that we are listening to the cries and the longings of our fellow human beings with whom we share this planet. Because even in this one church, because it is so diverse, we have people on both sides of this cultural gap and a number of other cultural gaps within our society, whether it's marriage equality or something else. And so there are some who think that me talking about violence and injustice regarding race is optional or questionable or maybe even counterproductive. And others for whom it's not an option, and it's not a question of whether to talk about it, but it's a question of what to do about it. The truth is that you and I could decide to attend a church of people who all just look like us, and worship like us, and think like us, and believe like us, and experience the world much the same as we do. But for many reasons, you and I have chosen a different path. A very different path. Why does it matter? It matters because, first of all, by being a community of people of many cultures, colors, classes, and creeds, and being with people of different political persuasions and generations and sexual orientations, we are a microcosm of the world we live in. The question before us is the question that's before all of humanity. What does it look like to love your neighbor? Does it mean to love only those who love you? Because as the Bible says, even sinners love the people who love them. There's nothing particularly noble about loving those who love you. There's nothing virtuous about being with people who all agree with you. Jesus, you may recall, was known for sharing meals with sinners and prostitutes and tax collectors. In other words, he ate with people considered to be the other in his times. He would not let social or religious barriers divide him from the human family. The Buddha, many people don't know this, he shaved his head because he was rejecting the caste system in his religion and his culture and his time. Back then, there was clear castes, and some people were less than other people, and some were even considered untouchable. Both of these religious teachers and icons did not keep to their own kind. Why? Because they knew, and they wanted us to know, that we are not whole. We are not whole if we are not listening to the cries and the laments and the dreams and the longings of our brothers and sisters with whom we share this planet. They knew, and they wanted us to know, that we are not whole if we only surround ourselves with people who agree with us and who experience the world as we do. As our children return to school, as our church starts to launch a new year with so much promise, we are reminded once again by painful and poignant events in the world around us why we do what we do. Why we work so hard to create a sense of shared purpose, and why we try to create concrete change in the world. We are not satisfied to just talk about it. We're not satisfied to just pray about it. We want to see real, measurable results. We want to see the children of our partner schools off the at-risk list. We want to see the disparity of life expectancy based on zip codes in Tulsa ended. We want to see the disproportionate incarceration of people of color in this country over. We want to see carbon emissions reduced. We want to see that $1 paid to a woman in the workplace equals $1 paid to men. We want to see real, measurable, concrete change, and we want to be a part of it, and that's why we join together in this way in this church. I know it's going to be a really meaningful and amazing year, especially with you all back, with Dave Ruffin joining our team. We are going to learn even better how to love our neighbors, whether our neighbors are from the central United States or Central America. Whether they're in prison or in poverty, whether they live in wealth or in prosperity. How do we love our neighbors? Let us be vigilant and intentional about listening to the cries and the laments of people, especially people who are different from us. Which begs the question, how do we keep together a congregation of people this vast, this different? We have 3 agreements. Since we're not bound together by all having the same belief, the same creed, the same doctrine and dogma that we all agree on, we're connected instead by 3 agreements. We call it a covenant. A covenant, if you don't know, is a sacred promise. It's a promise that we give from out of the core of our own heart. But it's not just about an individual decision to agree to this promise. It's about an admission that we need one another. I need you in times of tragedy. I need you in times of celebration. I need you to help me to learn and to grow and to be whole. I need you because left alone, I am limited by my own shortcomings, my own experiences, and my own resources. And yet together, we are so much more. With you, I am more. With you, my life is more, my vision is more, my capacity for grief and courage and hope and action are more. Well, thank God it's a covenant and not a contract. When someone breaks a contract, somebody's about to get sued. But when you break a covenant, somebody's going to be forgiven. We know when we agree to a promise this profound that we're not going to always get it right 100% of the time. We know that we can't just from our own will, because we say it, live it. But we can strive together and count on one another and count on God to help us to live out the best that we can be and to rise to the better angels of our nature. Agreement number 1 of all souls, to dwell together in peace. That doesn't mean that we're never going to get mad or lose our temper or disagree. I don't even think that's humanly possible, right? Yet we say it every time we get together. Dwelling in peace means that we're committing to stay at the table, to be open and look for ways to be in respectful and responsible relationship even when we disagree. Great. You know, if humanity has to wait until we all agree before there will be peace, there will never be peace. Dwelling together in peace is a practice of staying at the table even when it's hard. It is an attitude, an aspiration, and a commitment that we make with one another and with God. Agreement number 2, seek the truth in love. This is about affirming love over truth. We are saying that not any one of us knows the final and ultimate and definitive truth. And so we humbly admit that we are all in the process of seeking the truth. And that's why we agree while we're on this journey to meet in love. Because love is more important than truth. And the third agreement is to help one another, which is both an admission that we need each other and a promise that we will be there to help one another. Because as Rabbi Hillel asked, if we are only for ourselves, what are we? I believe, I think it was the novel Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, that she writes about the commandment to love our parents in the Bible. It's not really just about our parents. That she says that's just the starting point, our parents, because they're close to us and we need them and they need us. So we love our parents. That's not the end goal of the commandment. That's the beginning. That's a start. We start there and then we try to love our neighbors. Then we try to love all of humanity. So that's the same way with the three agreements. We agree to live this way together in this church because we are a church. We are a community. But that's not the end goal. That's just the beginning. It's because our goal is to take it out there and learn how to love our neighbors. And every day, let that idea of neighbor mean one more person. You know, in fact, it's not really even about our neighbors. It's about what kind of world we want to live in. I want to live in a world where we can celebrate our differences while also affirming that we are all fundamentally the same. I still believe in the dream. I still believe in the dream. Do you?
Yes, sir.
And I believe that you and I have an important role to play, and that this church has an important role to play, and that everybody who's listening online or podcasts or all of that have a role to play as we begin to create the world anew today, right now. Some of us are inspired by Jesus. Some are inspired by Buddha. Some are inspired by nature, and some are inspired just by common sense to live this way. But let us agree that what is most important in our church is not what you believe, but whether you are willing to love. And part of loving our neighbors is listening to their cries and their dreams and trying to hear in those longings our own deepest needs and our own selves. Imagine what the world could be like if everybody began to choose love over belief. Let us always hold love beyond belief. I love you. God bless you. Amen.